In aviation, knowing where you are is only half of the battle. You have to know where you're going. We use bearing to define the horizontal angle between your aircraft and a destination, but as you'll see in Microsoft Flight Simulator, north isn't always north and the direction you're pointing isn't always the direction you're moving. Welcome to this new video in the Microsoft Flight Simulator A to Z series. If we're talking about bearings, we've got three types of bearings. The first one is the true bearing. This is measured using the geographic North Pole as 000 degrees. If you draw a line on a paper map or on a VFR chart, the angle you measure is your true bearing. The next one is the magnetic bearing. Since the Earth is a giant magnet, the north your compass points to isn't exactly where the North Pole is. This difference is called magnetic variation. Most of your cockpit instruments, your compass and VOR radials use magnetic bearing. Then we've got the third one. The third one is the relative bearing. This ignores north entirely. It measures the angle from the nose of your airplane to the target. If a mountain is directly off your right wing, its relative bearing is 90 degrees in the cockpit. We often call this 3 o'clock. Let's look at some examples to show you what the difference is between the true bearing and the magnetic bearing. To demonstrate the difference between the true north and the magnetic north, I parked the aircraft on Pitavik Space Base, known for ICAO code Bravo Golf Tango Lima. This is the ultimate place to test the magnetic vs the true north. As you can see, I'm currently located on runway 08, which means that the direction of this runway is somewhere between 080 and 085 degrees in the true direction, right? Which means based on the true north. If you would look up this runway, either using, for example, Little Nav Map or one of the other navigation tools, you will figure out that the official direction of this runway is 085 degrees. So we're inside the aircraft. Right, let's first tune up the light a little bit, because it's a little bit dark, so we can do that using these nice things, because I want to show you a few things. So first of all, you will see the compass, right? If we're looking into the compass, and let me scroll into that, you will see that the bearing, or the direction, which is currently shown on the compass, is 120 something degrees, right? If you would look at the G1000, which is over here, you will see it is actually 123 degrees. But that's kind of weird, right? Because we're on runway 08, so why does it show this? Well, because this is the value which is the magnetic bearing, right? So these are the values which it gets based on the magnetic fields of the Earth. Now if I would move to the right screen, you can see the track. The track in this case is 085 degrees. And that's being derived from the GPS track, which correctly identifies that the aircraft is currently pointing into the direction of 85 degrees away from the geographic North Pole. So what's the conclusion based on this? Now we're seeing these numbers. Well, that's that the magnetic declination at Toul is currently approximately 37 degrees west. How to calculate that? Well, we've got the true location, which is at 085 degrees. Plus we've got that 37 degrees, which is roughly 122 degrees, right? So the magnetic variation plus the true direction is the magnetic direction. The compass thinks north is 37 degrees to your left, so that's why it's pointing to the heading 123. Now let's look at the relative bearing, and to do that we're gonna add a waypoint. In this case we're gonna add the waypoint Mare, and to do that we're gonna press direct and then simply use the small knob to add that nice navigation aid into our system. So we're gonna use the small knob and the large knob to move around. Oh, a bit too far. Here we go. Mare, where are you? Almost there. You can see Mare bearing 55 degrees. Can I say activate? Fine for us. Now you see a few things happening, right? First of all, you see that the DTK has been added, but if we move to this one, you can also see that the needle is now pointing to that specific beacon. Here we also see the DTK, and here we see the bearing of this nice beacon. So what does this information mean, right? If we start again with the aircraft heading, the current heading for the aircraft is 123 degrees. It's on the HSI, and you also can see it on the external HUD if you enable the external HUD, and that's the magnetic bearing. Now the absolute bearing can be found in the magenta text in the top right status bar, and by the single line magnets needle on the HSI, the absolute bearing to the station Mare in this case is that 55 degrees. Now if we want to calculate the relative bearing in this case, we need to calculate it as follows. You have the relative bearing, which is the absolute bearing minus the heading. So in this case we need to do 55 degrees, which is this one, minus 123 degrees is minus 68 degrees. So if you would kind of normalize that, you will of course never be able to fly negative values. So what you need to do is do that minus 68 degrees plus 360, which means that you would need to fly in a direction of 292 degrees to reach the beacon. Now the bonus, relative bearing or true north. Because you're at tool BGTL where the magnetic error is extreme, your nose is physically pointing to 085 degrees true. This means true north 0 degrees is exactly 85 degrees to our left. The relative bearing of true north from our current location is in that case 275 degrees. Now let's look at some other things, because there are still some other things which you might want to change. Because by default the displays are showing heading up. This is the way that is the default way that those systems are configured, but you can change that. So currently you can see that north is at your left side. Now if you want to change this, right, if you want to change the direction, you can also do that by pressing the menu option, which brings up this nice menu. You can press enter and then you will see the orientation. The orientation can be changed by moving down one position and then changing it. If you use the small knob to change it, you can for example set it to north up. In that case you will see that the display will change. So now the north up is up and you can see that Mare is in this direction. However, what I read on the internet is that it's not normal to do it like that, and you will likely use the heading up way to configure the displays. It can be compared a little bit with setting up your navigation in your car, where you can also change this, location. So now you know also how to change this in at least the Garmin G1000, but I believe that for the other ones there are similar options. Understanding your bearing and you'll never be lost again, just temporarily between waypoints. I hope you found this video helpful. It was a kind of a complicated topic, but I thought, hey, let's challenge myself. But I hope that it was clear enough by showing you some differences inside the aircraft, where you could clearly see the difference between the true north vs the magnetic north. Thanks for watching and hope to see you back next week for another video in the Microsoft Flight Simulator A to Z series.